Hello. Hello, everyone. This is Nitin Raizada. I'm a Vice President with Indegene in the Commercial Solutions Division. It's my privilege to welcome you all in a panel discussion today on a topic which is gaining more and more interest, more and more importance in the life sciences world, the impact of digital in improving patient experience through a spectrum of disease awareness, seamless access to care, and personalized onboarding. I'm joined today with some senior leaders from pharma industry, as well as a participant from the health tech, which is the reason why all this is happening. I'll introduce the panelist in just a moment. As part of my background, I've been with the pharma and the healthcare industry for about 22 years. Commercial innovation, HCP and patient transformation, engagement transformation is something that I've invested a large part of my career in. Very excited and passionate about this area and with the changes that are happening in this space. We're looking at an era where after the pandemic, digital marketing has come front and center of a lot of our activities. Pharma continues to make tremendous amount of investment in this area, innovation in setting up how in capabilities that were not envisaged yesterday are becoming more and more important. On the other hand, the physician and the patient interaction is changing. There's a lot of data. In fact, in all such sessions that you would have heard today, we're talking about a deluge of data, but at the same time, we are lost in that data. That data can help us understand the patient flow, the journeys that are becoming more and more critical to understand patient behavior, to understand the different patterns, their personas, and how we can bring in the right next best action and the next intervention. But at the same time, we are struggling with the data and privacy, regulation and control that's coming into the picture. And that's creating a number of challenges for pharma as they bring up their capability in this area. While consumer expectation is for anytime, anywhere, those things to implement within the pharma construct is proving to be a challenge. And we hear a lot while pharma would like to, bring in functionalities, bring in platforms that can help patients as well as providers in a meaningful engagement. Many a time they struggle. Now, with this panel that we have today, I have folks like Christine, Dan, Marie, and Anurag, who come with a significant experience in the pharma industry. They've all been engaged. I would love to have them introduce themselves one by one and talk about their point of view on this topic before we get into a panel discussion. So, Christine, why don't we start with you, and then we'll go over the panel.
Thank you so much. So I'm Christine. I'm the VP for Customer Experience with AbbVie. And I come to the pharma industry actually and love this topic because before I joined pharma, my roots and my starting point was actually marketing laundry in the consumer packaged goods industry. And throughout that journey from consumer packaged goods to being in consulting for other people and now being in pharma, I think the thread through that is really all about the consumer experience, right? Whether it's laundry or it's healthcare, at the end of the day, it's all about consumers at the back of it. And as I look at this topic specifically, I think more so than any other year with us experiencing COVID, it really points to this intersection between how consumers think and what's available for us as well in the industry and what makes what things are possible now with digital. On the one hand, you look at a lot of the disease areas that our patients have to go through. It's just become a lot more complex. Their journey has become a lot more complex over the years. Gone are the days when consumers just have a headache or have a stomach ache, and they automatically know that what it looks like, what their symptoms look like, and can get to a doctor or get to a pharmacy to get their problem solved. In a lot of cases, disease areas are a lot more complex to diagnose, a lot more more complex to treat, and access to care is a lot more difficult as well. On the other hand, consumers, because of all these technologies and channels, consumers now have a lot more sources for information other than just going directly to their doctor. And with that comes the opportunity for misinformation as well, as we saw during COVID, where there's a lot more of misinformation out there. No matter how the government or us as an industry tries to correct that misinformation. So the role we can play, I think, as I think about that, is we have to stay on top of trends, right? It's not just about us and us pushing information. We got to listen too on what's happening in the consumer landscape and understand their journey and what they go through and what they believe in. And at the end of the day, work through the information we have, the technologies we have, and the platforms we have to make sure that we can determine when, what, and how to give that information in a way that's accessible to the consumers that we actually want to address.
Fantastic. Thanks for that perspective. And in fact, there are a few questions today in the panel that we will have around the points that you made. Anurag, why don't we go with you next?
Yeah, thanks, Nitin, and really excited to be here with distinguished panelists. So I'm Anurag Thakur. I'm the Senior Director of Digital Operations at Bayer US Pharma. My prior experience has been around at Novartis, where I've had a multitude of roles specifically around multi-channel and digital and helping to drive transformation there. So with regards to the question that Nitin just posed, right? I mean, the topic itself says it all, the whole aspect of digital and the aspect of plethora of data being around. The consumers and patients today have a lot more avenues, a lot more platforms, a lot of places to go to. And that, as what Christine was saying, there's where the opportunity is for the life sciences company to kind of be there and understand what those are and identify what the patients are doing. So one of the first things is, what we could do is, identify where the patients or the consumers are. And one case that comes to mind quickly is, not just understanding their journey, but also superimposing their hobbies, their demographics, their age, et cetera, and seeing what do they do, what do they like. So I've seen brands kind of go through and a few brands have done a good job of identifying those opportunities and, playing in that space, going to those platforms or those portals where they find that disease or that condition really goes into, and then educating them there. So it's very super important to be there. And then when you kind of drive them or invite them to participate in your own ecosystem, understanding that, giving them an easy to use, user-friendly content to kind of digest, right? It's about the brand, but it's also around about what the support that the company can provide to the brand, to the patients. And that's really going to be very critical for them. And the third is to basically track the information, understand when they're doing things for us or they're providing information, whether it's through a patient program or through other things, identifying it and tracking it and making the right decisions for them. A simple, but a kind of a stupid case in point here is I've seen people kind of run through consumer programs and then offer copay cards. And when they offer copay cards, somebody's a copay card gets activated, but they're still continuing to get messages that says, "Hey, have you tried our product?" Well, on the other side, they're already on your product. So making sure that you connect the dots and you have a more holistic ecosystem, I think that's really what life sciences and pharma companies can really do.
Absolutely. I think, in this consumerized world, all of us, all the patients are consumers, right? And we are used to what other industries, banks, retail, etc. is offering. So why would the expectation be any different for healthcare? Thanks, Anurag, for that perspective. Dan, we'd go with you next.
Yeah, thank you. Daniel Keene, I'm a Director for Patient Services Innovation at Novartis. I'm responsible for our broader patient services strategy and our 3 to 5 year capabilities roadmap. Previously to this, I was in the consulting world for almost a decade, primarily within patient services. So patient services strategy, design, execution, IT implementations, you name it. Did some work within sales and marketing analytics as well, with some stints within CPG. So worked within the beverage industry for several years and within the travel industry as well. So bring a little bit of a different perspective sometimes to a bit of the work that I do and really what's possible in terms of patient interaction. What I will say with respect to what patients are looking for from us today, the healthcare landscape has completely changed from even 10 years ago. So in 2010, 15% of patients who were insured were on high deductible health plans. And today that's closer to 50%. And as a result, out-of-pocket costs are much higher for a lot of patients. They don't know how to navigate it. They're unsure how to go and pay for their treatments. And then additionally, you're kind of confronted with all these access restrictions. There's consolidation across insurers, and there's a lot more sort of managed markets type of play that determines the type of care that patients can get. And as a result, we need to step in to be able to make sure that when a doctor selects one of our medications, that those patients are able to receive it. And so when I think about how we need to interact with patients, it becomes making sure that you can at least navigate them through the access journey, while at the same time being able to, seemingly simple in something like the CPG industry, send a patient a text message, all of a sudden becomes extremely complex when you're dealing with protected health information. And so how do you go and navigate those complexities while also delivering that consumerized experience is really where you have to thread the needle to be able to reach patients today. And you're doing this in, a lot of times pharma is sitting there as this, non-covered party in a sea of covered entities who can all share information freely, and making sure that you can play the right role for patients to ensure that, they're getting the results out of those medications is where I see pharma playing today. And so, just one other thing is, as we go towards, much more complex therapies, rare disease indications, all of those needs just get more and more, pervasive. Because then you're dealing with clinical workups, you're dealing with routine kind of follow-ups, you're dealing with, much higher prior auth and vetting before an insurer will pay for those selected treatments. So I think, there's never been a time where our work is more important and where we have to be really, really crisp in our execution.
No, fantastic. And I think you laid down the ground for a lot of this conversation today. I think these are the challenges that we see all our customers, from a very simple unidimension marketing. It has become extremely complex with the novel therapies, with healthcare changing significantly, consumer expectation, and all of that. So Murray, I think that this is time when I invite you. You come in from a very different side of this entire conundrum. You're helping a lot of healthcare companies. Let's hear from you.
Yeah, so Nitin, thank you. And it's great to be on the panel with everybody. I'm Murray Brzezinski. I'm the CEO of Conversa Health. So Conversa, we built a platform. We actually think we're pioneering a new care delivery model called automated virtual care, which is designed to complement the existing models out there. And the whole idea is where you can automate care and offload walking patients down their care path in an evidence-based way. You want to be able to use technology to do that, and also use that technology to identify when patients need to get to higher levels of care. So we talk about automating care where it's possible and escalating to care when that's necessary. So we sit at the intersection of virtual and automation. We recently joined forces with Amwell through an acquisition, and Amwell, the telehealth company, is building the future infrastructure to support hybrid care. So the whole idea is to seamlessly be able to surround a patient with care, the kind of care that they need when they need it. So you've got digital, you've got virtual, you've got physical. All of those things should sort of blend into what the future is. We would just call healthcare. So that's where I'm coming from. As Nitin mentioned, our heritage is working with health systems and providers. So really understanding the trusted relationship between a care team and a patient. How do you extend that 24/7 with automation, and then identify patients to get to the higher levels of care when it's needed? So that's kind of the context, the lens I look at this through. And listening to the panelists, taking notes furiously here, I agree with all the trends that have been identified. So this notion that the care journey is getting more complex, that Christine talked about, the ideas Dan talked about, that the financial burden and the burden for just navigating healthcare is increasingly being put on the patient and the consumer more upstream, and that consumers, through consumerism, are demanding better experiences. They expect healthcare to be similar to the experiences they have in their everyday life. And I think I'll piggyback off of Anurag. I think the most important thing technology can do is help industry players collect, analyze, and use data to make more informed decisions. So, I think about, we always talk about engagement, and I always think about engagement as not an end in itself, but a means to an end. And the whole idea is if you can get patients engaged in their care, you can you get permission to collect the wisdom of the patient, which is all the data we all carry around with us. We know what our health status is, we know what our care status is, and we can add that to the body of knowledge that the care teams have through the EHR and through other data sources to really understand what's going on with the patient right now. And then you can increasingly make decisions with technology in real time to determine what's the next best action, which is what we're talking about. And some of those next best actions can be handled completely automated. They can be handled digital, they can be handled virtual, some need to be handled physical. How do you help navigate with a lot of data, which is really wisdom of the patient being used to address them, meet them where they are in a very personalized way? So I think at a very high level, the idea, we have a lot of evidence in healthcare about what works, right? What treatments work. Obviously, you guys all bring that to the table. How do you keep people on an evidence-based pathway so you can drive the outcome that we're all driving toward? But we're all individuals, so keeping us on that pathway needs to actually open up variability of engagement, which is personalization. And I think that's the trick, variability of engagement, but reducing variability of care.
Thanks, Maria. I think this is going to be an interesting dialogue as we hear the pharma experts talk about this topic, right? So in my reckoning, right, the number of conversations that we have with our customers when we look at patient marketing, we are dealing with patients who are not known to us, initially as we start to market our products, which journey they are on, where they are in their entire journey at that point of time, what are their challenges. And with the information deluge, Christine, you mentioned that in your point of view, there's a lot of misinformation. Everybody wants to go to Google or, based on whatever limited knowledge they may have, they are trying to collect information and they are informed in some way or the other. So with that trend happening in parallel, how do you see pharma can go to the market, can approach this entire patient marketing construct, right? How do you combat this particular trend and phenomena happening in the market? Anurag, maybe we'll start with you and go around the table.
Sure. So it's interesting question, Nitin, and I think we've hit on some of those core points, both the digital and data, right? So the basic ecosystem or the basic definitions what we need to do is really define a very strong web presence, right? Having a very strong website that addresses the basic questions that a consumer could have about the product, what it does, what it doesn't do, what are the side effects, the lifestyle changes that may need to be made, what supports there, and anything in between that can be really conjured up should be kind of made available in an easy enough manner. And misinformation happens when there isn't that place or single place to go to, the single voice of truth. And if now when you have that, you create a larger web of search and social, right? So from a paid search, organic search, making sure that when people are looking for something, a disease condition or your product specifically, they land on your website and they go to get information from the source as opposed to other people. Also, similarly, from a social perspective, making sure that you're playing or you're there in the social things, whether it's Twitter or whether it's Facebook, Instagram. These days, almost every pharma company has some kind of a presence there. So making sure you're present in that space. And another key thing is also what I've seen being successful in my experiences is having an ability to kind of respond, right? So if there's any questions that come in, right? So having some chat bots or having a call center as appropriate, depending on what the product is, what the condition is, so there's a way that if there's something that doesn't get addressed or there's a question, they can come to this from that lens. And last but not least, from a messaging from a HCP side, right? So making sure that you're providing enough messaging to the HCP so they can go back to the folks that are coming into them and give them the tools, give them the information that they need. So from a proactive lens, you're addressing this from the root as opposed to kind of waiting for things to kind of just spiral.
And I think, you hit the nail. You're talking about presence, not only presence, a coordinated presence, something one feeds the other. And I think that's that's what we are seeing in the omni-channel conversations all across the pharma sector. Christine, what's your point of view? You talked about this briefly in your PV as well. Christine?
Thank you. Anurag had talked a lot about channels, right, and what we can do in our own channels and our own content. And so just to build on Anurag, the one piece that now of reality that that I think we also have to see is it's not just about us in a lot of cases, right? It's also about where they see information and what they trust. And so to sort of build on what Anurag had talked about, when I think about content, right, it's not just making sure that we have easy and seamless content where we can in our own channels, but also making sure that the right content is out there and it's easy to get, right? Regardless of whether a consumer goes to social media or goes to somewhere else to find information, right? Making sure that we have those packets out to also be disseminated in channels that we don't own. From a channel standpoint, I think not just is it making sure that we have those easy, seamless information in our channels, but also recognize that there are other channels of information that our consumers go to. And how do we partner with those, right? How do we partner with those venues to make sure that that also gets filtered there, that there's no misinformation that happens in those other channels that might not be directly with us, right? And that's where, you know, educating a broader set other than physicians may also matter, on top of what Anurag had talked about in terms of educating physicians as well. The last piece is just the right moment, right? And the right issues for the right consumers at the right moment. You know, we can, in many cases, especially in certain disease areas, there's a proliferation of a lot of information. And to the extent that we can simplify that information and personalize it in a way where the relevant information gets served up, then that's the more ideal scenario, right? So sort of bringing it back to a practical example, just like this COVID story, you know, maybe the consumer is looking for already knows the information, but the issue is they don't know the right pharmacy to go to or the right care provider to go to find shots, right? Or maybe it's, hey, they actually don't even know how to register online, and we have to sort of help them navigate it through another way, through a phone or physically going somewhere. So, you know, really sort of tumbling that and thinking about the specific consumer we're talking to and what's their specific circumstance, what information do they need in order to really pull them down that journey, and personalizing it specifically for them.
Yeah, so I think you are talking about that n is equal to 1 construct where you're looking at an individual and addressing their specific needs. And I think where you know Conversa is playing today, probably you would be able to cite some examples, some experience in that space.
Yeah, I would agree exactly with what Anurag and Christine said, that you know, especially the combating of misinformation. I think, you know, you have to have a source of truth, as Anurag said. I think you have to have a trusted relationship. You can't have trust without a relationship. So I think the first step is, how do you develop a relationship? You know, Conversa is conversation. The whole idea is it's a two-way street. You can't get data and understand the patients where they are without engaging them. And you know, I think that the ability, once you do that, to put the advice that you're trying to provide in context of the care journey, and then even more broadly around, you know, whole person care. So once you do that, it's more difficult. It's easier to combat misinformation. It's more difficult for misinformation to compete with what you're providing, because it's not about here's how this medication works or here's how this treatment works. It's here's how this treatment works in the context of your journey, what you're going through and your larger health goals and issues. So the only way to get context, again, is to collect data. I think the next step from context is personalization, and personalization has a lot of dimensionality to it, right? It's about access, it's about equity. So languages, you know, cultural awareness, reading level, people are visual learners. The only way to understand, so it's the clinical personalization and context, and then it's the engagement piece, which is all of those other dimensions to meet people where they are. So when you're educating, it's not about, you know, educating, it's about, are they learning, right? It's sort of like, you know, it's not about listening, it's about, are you hearing? And so I think putting those things together, technology can do a lot to help enable that. And we have lots of examples. I'll give some examples as we go down the conversation as to what we've been able to do with data to be able to provide context and personalization that leads to behavior change and ultimately measurable outcomes.
Fascinating. I think this is what you know, in a lot of our spaces, in a lot of constructs within pharma, I think we are moving in that direction more and more. So let me switch tracks and talk about another important aspect. In fact, in keynote today, the CEO of GE Healthcare talked about it, the power of ecosystems. Right, and we are seeing a very rapid emergence of many other very important entities within the healthcare: patient communities, appointment booking systems, telehealth, digital health platforms, fitness, you name it, right? There is a lot that's happening out there. They are all participants in the same healthcare that we are participating in. So from a life sciences perspective, what do you think is the role of our companies today? What would be our strategy? Dan, let's start with you on this question.
Yeah, sure. So, when I think about all of the new technologies that are coming out today, a lot of times we get asked, well, why don't you just go and use this app, or why doesn't the patient just go to this app and use that? And I think the key here is picking and choosing from the best of what's out there, and having specific use cases for each technology that you want to plug in, at least a patient services program. So I'm thinking more in a postscript world, because that's where my role is. And so I think it's actually a really exciting time, because we have a plethora of options to choose from to meet the specific needs of different therapeutic areas, different brands, different patient types, everything from weight loss to meditation to calendar bookings, like some folks mentioned. And if you can take some of the things that patients are already using today and make them a part of your program, the patient's going to interact with those on a much more fluid basis than they would in a standalone app. And I'm not sure about others' experience, but standalone apps generally have, at least pharma branded standalone apps, depending on the patient type, can have lots of barriers for patients to actually download them, use them. It's for a singular use case. A lot of times we see much better engagement when your services or what you're trying to achieve is embedded in something that the patients are already using today. And so how do you go and include that as part of your patient experience? And I think you'll find that the engagement is much higher, and you actually get the results that you're looking for. And then on the previous question, we talked about how do you go and make sure that patients believe what you're providing them, giving them accurate information. And I think a lot of times it's patients want to engage when they are engaging in familiar platforms, and so sometimes they don't even know that the pharma manufacturer is part of their treatment journey, and nor may they ever really know sometimes. But the key is to go and build an experience that they're familiar with, that gets you to the outcomes that you need, but not making it kind of a confusing, well, look, Dan Keene showed up from this pharma company I've never heard of before, and now wants to schedule doctor's appointments for me. How does it become part of the experience that they're already doing in terms of scheduling appointments with their doctor, right? So that's just I see it as a great time to be able to take advantage of multiple different options. And as a strategy overall, I think that lets you stay nimble, because as the landscape evolves over time, you can drop the pieces that may not really work anymore, and you can add the blocks that make sense for the patient or the healthcare ecosystem, as it will be in the future. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here today.
Wonderful. So you are validating what was said in that keynote speech, that one is the ecosystem, but more importantly is the ability to work within the workflow that is already being used by a patient or a doctor, right? And if that ecosystem allows you access, then leverage that.
Yep.
Christine, what's your perspective on this point?
It's actually funny, right? As an industry, we ask what life science can and should do. Ideally, for all of us, I think we grew up in an industry where life science wants to be front and center in owning our channel, right? It's we want our websites, we want our own telecenters, we want our own apps, right? That's sort of the kind of the industry we grew up in. But it really is sort of tumbling it and realizing the reality that these new channels of information and sharing and community building, to Murray's point, is valuable to that patient journey, right? That and And the piece for us is really looking through it and sifting through it and thinking through where does it add to the story that we want to be able to tell our patients, and pick and choose those that we think can add to it, while being aware of others that don't add to it or might detract from it, and making sure, as we talked about in that earlier panel, that we can make sure that at the end of the day, by stitching it all together, we drive our patients right down the funnel to the right outcomes that are ultimately right for their health, right?
Fantastic. Thanks, Christine. Anurag, your take on this?
Yeah, so I mean, I think some of the points that I had, Murray and Christina already touched on, right? And Dan's already touched on that as well from his past answers. But I think from an ecosystem perspective, and I think the coordination, I think those are the two key words that I take away, is the aspect of building the connectedness, right? So when you talk about the whole aspect of being in the pharma space, there's regulations, data privacy. So you just can't get access to all the information and the data that's out there. And I think Christine touched on the fact that you can do macro kind of connections where you're looking at trends and you're looking at what's going on in those spaces that may kind of help you drive messaging and you drive your content, their behaviors or their interests, etc. That'll help you kind of message better. And then from your own perspective, connecting the channels and connecting the ecosystem together into one, making analytics and data-driven decisions as opposed to here's what I think should look like. And the content is the key. I think one of the key things we keep forgetting is they could be in all these different platforms and stuff, but they will only gravitate to things that are of interest and of value, right? So I've seen situations where for a brand team, we built we took 3 months to 4 months to build a large ecosystem for them. And then when we asked them, what are you going to send them? We're going to send them a piece that was already sent to them 6 months ago. So now it just completely contradicts the emphasis. So as much as building the ecosystem and the whole machinery is important, is as important to have right content, because then in that case, you can basically message them appropriately and they will kind of engage with you because that's of value.
Wonderful. So I think, the more we think about it, deeper understanding of the patient journey, the patient flow, how are they accessing care is becoming more and more important. And one wonders how, digital capabilities, AI, data, how can they help one reimagine this journey itself? And how can these capabilities actually facilitate? Once you have the journey, then those programs, how can it unlock value? So Anurag, you've been in the space for a long time. I've known of your work. Why don't you go at it first, and then we'll go around.
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, again, I'll build on everything I was saying, right? So the whole idea about, data is scarce, right? You can only collect what you can collect because of the fact is, you're in a pharma space and you're in a very sensitive area, right? So there's no, you can't just go free willy and ask for stuff. There's regulations, there's laws that kind of prohibit. So the question is, when you do data collection, be purposeful, understand what you're trying to do, identify, to my point previously, what exactly do you want to learn from them and how will you use that to drive better messaging, right? So, and I've seen, a lot of acquisition programs. I'm sure everybody else is as well, right? So you build an acquisition program and there are people like, I've contracted so-and-so to give me 50,000 leads in a month. Sure and behold, they give you 50,000 leads, but how many of those leads are really valuable? How many of those leads are really potential for you to move forward in the journey of kind of educating them, making them aware, and they could be potential patients for you, right? So you don't know that. So the whole aspect of being very purposeful, getting the data, identifying the behaviors that are of value, of interest to your messaging and to your brand, leveraging consent and preferences very carefully, identifying what exactly are their preferences and what kind of channels do they want to talk to you about, and what are they consenting into. So having a very, very clean, precise language from a consent perspective is critical. And then going back to, like I was saying, from a reporting and analytics perspective, then when you communicate to them in a proper way, then identifying what the new data telling you, and potentially even going back and collecting more information along the way as relevant for your use case, right? So it's building that snowball in a very deliberate and a purposeful manner, but then leading to better patient outcomes, leading to better education, and leading to better awareness of what the product is.
Wonderful. Dan, your perspective on this? You've been engaged on a different spectrum within patient access.
Yeah, for sure. So, when I think about, how do we go and leverage digital to drive more value? I think it really comes in terms of, honing the interactions that we have with patients and providers. I think you'll find 90% or more of offices today are still using fax machines to do the majority of their work. And so, what is seemingly, again, a simple ask that most people would say I would normally send a text message can all of a sudden become extremely complicated when you're dealing with the healthcare space. And so, how do you go and leverage digital to go and reduce the friction in a lot of those interactions? And a lot of the questions that we're answering for patients and providers are oftentimes the same. And I think it's about, making sure that each interaction you have is really crisp, has a defined outcome, and then ultimately, whoever you're interacting with can actually take the action that you're requesting of them to close the loop. So whether that's, making sure that a piece of information is in, making sure that a patient is engaging with you to make sure that their doctor knows about any side effects that they may have. If you're calling them, they may not pick up the phone. I mean, how often have you picked up the phone from sometimes a number that you don't know, or I don't feel like talking with them right now? But I'm pretty sure everyone's opened a spam text message, even when you know it's spam, just to confirm that it's spam. And so the chances of a patient going and engaging with you in that way is much higher. And I think that's where you have to find that secret sauce in terms of making sure that what you're trying to go and get out of that interaction is where you're placing your digital tools in order to go enable that in what is historically an extremely analog type of environment. And then from a patient services side, there's all sorts of new capabilities coming online just to support streamlining our operations in terms of obtaining access for patients. So everything from all of a sudden agents don't need to wait on the phone anymore because there's a bot that dials phone numbers and waits on hold for you and then transfers the call when someone picks up the phone. It saves a lot of time, right? So there's interesting bits of AI that are coming in there. And then likewise to Anurag's points around data, there's so much of it these days that sometimes you almost don't know what to do with it. And I think the key is there. You can get into analysis paralysis. You can segment until your heart's desire. But what is the right level of personalization and segmentation to be able to operate in a regulated environment where you're not always able just to say anything you want? A lot of things have to go through MLR reviews and so on. So finding that right balance, I think, is also key.
Fantastic. Christine, your perspective?
I think the piece as you look at digital and data and technology is there's really been a proliferation that has benefited the patients and again, our ability to be able to serve patients better, right? But the one piece just to add to the panel is at the end of the day, and it goes back to one of the things that we opened up with, right? The piece we need to remember at the end of it is the patients, right? And we have to do this in a way that doesn't break that trust relationship and doesn't discount their personal preferences on how they want to be communicated to, how they want to be personalized to, right? And how we want to and how they want to interact with us. Ideally, we get to a point like Netflix where we provide something of value really to them through all of the efforts in collecting the data because we're serving up exactly what we need. And therefore, as Murray said, we get their permission, right? That we're giving them something that actually improves their lives, improves their outcomes, and they give us their permission for us to engage with them in the right way.
Wonderful. So, my back room is telling me that we are way late in our time. We have a few minutes left, so I'll cut some questions from the list that we originally had. But one question that has come up again and again in the conversation is that, a lot of these patient programs are with the intent to change behavior, right? You would want to educate the patient, you would want to educate the caregiver, bring them to a certain behavior. Adherence, for example, a topic that's been there for a long, long time, is seeing renewed interest with personalization at n equal to 1. So how do we prioritize, any approaches that you've seen work, in which barriers to shift first? How do you identify, a data-backed approach towards managing the entire behavior change in the patients? Christine, why don't we go with you first on this one?
Actually, this is a curious piece, right? Well, at the same time, there's been a push for more privacy with patients. The interesting phenomenon now, especially with social media, is individual consumers actually are more willing to voice out as well, right? And there are more channels now for us to actually hear from patients directly. And it's an opportunity. That's where the opportunity, I think, is sometimes, just beyond us pushing information and data. As I sort of opened up with, if we open our listening ears and hear where the conversation is going and where their needs are, then we can respond in a more custom way, right? In a more relevant way, based on the questions that patients are coming up with.
Agreed. I think that's a very interesting perspective. Dan, in patient support and onboarding, how do you see this happening?
Yeah, and I'll keep it brief because I know we're short on time. But I look at the continuum of the patient journey. A lot of times there's a heavy focus on adherence, and really that's just one part of the patient journey. That's when they're already on therapy. Hopefully they're maintaining their regimen. But I actually find that access is one of the most important barriers, because unless the patient gets access covered by their insurance or however it may be, then they're never going to be able to have a chance to even be adherent to therapy. And 1 in 5 prescriptions is left at the pharmacy or never picked up. And so I think making sure that you close that barrier first, it's one of the most important upfront ones that limits treatment for patients. Otherwise, you really have no chance of helping them down the line. And then for adherence, I think it's, again, like I mentioned earlier, just finding that right level of personalization, but allowing those patients to often have a curated catalog of topics that they can choose from. A lot of times with mobile and everything today, patients don't need a phone call to go and tell an agent that they want to talk about X, Y, and Z. They can choose from something right from their phone if they have a question and watch a video about injection training, for example, and that can suffice. So I think there's a lot more opportunity to kind of self-guide for patients today as well.
Right. And Murray, from your experience, right, you're doing a lot of work in this area. What's your perspective? What's been your experience in this space?
Yeah, I mean, first, I think that there is a tendency, which I think is negative in the industry broadly, healthcare, to assume that there is a patient journey and you're trying to digitize it. There's no such thing as a generic patient journey. We're all on our own journey. And that's the whole idea. If you're going to leverage data, that's the opportunity. And I think similar with barriers, there are barriers. A lot of them are social determinant barriers, but they're not static. So one of the things we've learned is when in doubt, ask the patient. And the more frequently you can ask the patient, the more successful you're going to be at understanding what's the barrier they're dealing with today. It may be a very different barrier they were in taking their meds a week ago. And that's going to dictate what the next best action is, which is going to change the journey. You might be going right versus going left. You're taking a different action. So, I think about it through our lens. I'll just give a few examples, simple example or two. We've developed a program that helps reduce the cancellation and no-show rates for important procedures like colorectal cancer screening, for example. And typically 30% of people in this country just don't show up the day up for that procedure. It's horrible. It's terrible for the people. It's a loss of revenue for the system. It's a waste of that slot for other patients that want to have that procedure. And so the response has always been, let's get reminder services out there. Let's call the patient, remind them the day before, the week before that their appointment is coming. And you'll see maybe a few basis point reduction in no-show rates. And the reason is that this is all behavioral. Most patients are hyper aware of the procedure. They're not coming in for a long tail of reasons, starting with, I'm afraid of the procedure. I'm afraid of the results I might get. I might not have access to transportation. Is my insurance going to cover it? There's a whole litany of reasons. If you could sit down with a patient and you were trained to ask for, are you planning to come? No. Why not? And you drill down to understand the root cause and what their fears are, and then you could address them, you could reduce that significantly. So a lot of that can be automated through digital technologies. And that's what we've done. was able to reduce it by over 60% reduction. The resulting people that aren't coming in for their procedure they're escalated to somebody who can help talk more of them out of it. But that resulting that's still not coming for whatever reason, they can be addressed and cancel that appointment 3 or 4 days in advance and open the slot for other patients. So it's a win-win. More people are getting this life-saving procedures, more revenue for the system. Other patients are able to avail themselves of those open slots. And that's a very simple example. I mean, it's very simple. If you could put a person in this patient's home, every day for a week before the procedure, it's impossible to do that from a cost and resource perspective. And so that's really ripe for technology. So that's all about identifying root cause, leveraging data, promoting positive behaviors or behavior change, and then you can measure the outcome and you can constantly optimize that feedback loop. And that's a combination of automation and people. It's escalating when somebody who's expert in this needs to deal with that patient because the technology can't. So I think it's a really nice example of how it can be used. And then, of course, the challenge is how do you do that in more complex use cases, more complex journeys, taking the whole patient into account, the whole person into account.
Thanks, Murray. I think, it's fascinating the way things are changing in the healthcare spectrum. So I have a lot of questions, right? And we had a few, about 10 minutes. I think I'll have time only for one question and we'll make it free for all. The question is addressed to Anurag and Christine from the audience, but please feel free to chime in. The question is, while the session is focused on patients, but we would like to know, how do you bring about synergies in HCP and patient outreach methodologies, right? We invest a lot of money, time, energy, investment, resources on HCPs. How do we bring a synergy between the two? We have about 2 minutes left, 2 or 3 minutes left in the session. So we go with Christine first, then Anurag, and then anybody else who would like to chime in.
Fortunately, this is where data helps, right? In a lot of the case, again, when you think about the whole patient journey, the patient journey doesn't get through without the coordination with their care providers as well, wherever that may be. As I said, sort of fortunately, even without de-anonymizing data, there's a whole plethora of available sources of data that we can actually stitch together in order to make sure that we can provide that feedback loop both to doctors and their care providers and their patients as well, right? An example journey, just sort of a theoretical journey, is, hey, the patient goes in and start to diagnose something. You may be able to find certain markers, zip codes, or certain areas where people are searching more for this information. You start to prime certain areas with those information and start to prepare, right? Lab data starts to come in from another site. So you can coordinate care and say, hey, there are patients that are coming through that may need care, and making sure that the environment and the ecosystem, the healthcare ecosystem, is prepared for some of that. Some of that, frankly, are being done by the healthcare systems themselves, not pharma-led, right? Because there's equal interest in the ecosystem to make sure that we can provide the appropriate care for those patients using those data signals. So Anurag will probably sort of talk through a little bit more of that, because that's sort of part and parcel of what he does in his space. So Anurag, I'll let you sort of explain how that data gets stitched together.
Yeah, no, I think it's a fair point, and I think, Christine, you hit a lot of the top topics or the themes that I wanted to hit. But the whole idea of, you can have a proactive response as well as a reactive. Proactive is some of the things we've talked about, is going in front and basically educating the HCPs. But from a reactive perspective, as you look at claims data and as you look at other patient data, how do you connect that with the other resources that you have from an HCP data, and how do you stitch it together? Leveraging and then building teams. So, one-to-one data reporting could be tricky. I'm sure it can be done, but it's a lot of cost to the overall ecosystem. But if you start to provide trends to the physician, saying, here's where your patients are, but here's what the patients that you put on therapy are doing or not doing, I think that'll help to kind of build on their communications with their corresponding patients and help drive that dialogue. And the word that Christine used, the whole aspect of feedback loop, right? Trying to connect the entire circle together. And it's a relationship between everything that's out there from a data perspective, plus the patient and what he or she's doing, and then what the physician has access to. And that, of course, the pharma company who's basically able to get points of data together and kind of stitch it together in some way, shape, or form.
And Nitin, can I add a point here? It's because it's a great question. Putting these together, we, for example, have just started to work with pharmaceutical companies, and where we've actually been working is where the platform is being used by a health system for delivery. Pharmaceutical company is providing the expertise around the drug or the treatment that fits into that whole care journey. And the patient is, we're able to provide the appropriate education, personalized to change behavior for patients. All of that information is flowing back to the provider. It's using the EMR, it's replenishing the EMR, it's a full loop. And so the providers are able to see where patients are getting stuck, how patients are using it, how they're understanding it, and then they can harness the wisdom of the full cohort of patients. So we're doing predictive analytics based on that. And you can predict where people are going to get stuck. They're not stuck now, but they're going to decompensate. And so we need to intervene earlier. So it's actually providing, and I liked Christine's word, we use it all the time, patient signals back to the HCPs. And that is actually driving how they then personalize and intervene and surround the patient with care, including the contributors to that, that care plan or care journey, which includes the treatment and the drugs.
Thank you. Thanks, Murray. So I realized two things. This topic is a topic that we can go on discussing. And the second thing is that the camera time is at premium. So I'm already getting a pushback. So thank you. Thanks a lot for your valuable comments. Where this discussion was very, very, very interesting. And I thank you from Indegene. We should be in touch soon. Thanks a lot.